Six Flags Over Texas is a park that is very near and dear to me. This was my home park growing up. I have been to this park so many times, I know it backwards and forwards. I love Six Flags Over Texas. It is one of my favorite parks. I know I'm biased, but I can't help myself, so bear with me as I gush about this park. Of course, before we begin, I have to thank Airtime Thrills. Most of the coaster footage you see in this video came from his second channel, so be sure to check him out. The rest of the footage in this video came from my dad. He still lives in Texas, and he was nice enough to film the long list of things I sent to him, so thanks, Dad! Six Flags Over Texas is actually the original Six Flags park, and it's where the name Six Flags actually comes from. The original name was a reference to the 6 different countries that have ruled over Texas, and those different countries make up most of the themed areas in Over Texas. We have Mexico, Spain, Texas, France, America, and the Old South. Not what they called it back when the park first opened, but hey, things change. For example, the America section of the park doesn't really exist anymore. It's been kind of absorbed into Gotham as a general DC themed area. And we have other areas that don't fit the Flags Over Texas theme, like Boomtown and the Tower District. Not every area is equal when it comes to theming. The Tower District especially has basically nothing. But most of the themed areas look really nice and are very on brand. The variety of theming is also really nice, with the Spain and Mexico areas really standing out. I do feel a bit bad for the France section. It looks nice, but there is literally nothing there. It takes 2 minutes to walk through the whole area. I mean, I guess it's historically accurate considering France ruled over Texas for the least amount of time, but still, it would be nice if the area had literally anything in it. Overall, Over Texas does a really good job at theming, and it makes the park nice to walk around. Six Flags Over Texas has 2 dark rides, a Justice League clone and a pirate themed one. The Justice League ride is nice enough. If you've ridden any of them, you'll know more or less what this one is like, but it's nice to have a shooting dark ride and a more traditional one as well in the same park. Now, as for Pirates of Spelunker Cave, I was skeptical yet excited when they announced this ride. I was a huge fan of the old dark ride, an Old West Looney Tunes ride, but a flood destroyed most of it, so they replaced it with this. It follows the exact same layout as the old ride, even reusing some of the scenery. So how did it turn out? Well, I was really disappointed when I first rode it. The old dark ride had things like, I don't know, an understandable storyline, effects that worked, no screens, audible voice lines, a consistent art style, none of which the new ride has. It just feels like a massive step down. Now that I've ridden the ride more, its weirdness and jank has kind of grown on me. Plus, it's air conditioned, which is a massive win in Texas. I can definitely appreciate the uniqueness of the ride. If I didn't have the original to compare it to, I'd probably view it a lot more favorably. I also really like the song it plays in the queue line. Very piratey. Other than the dark rides, Over Texas has a couple fun flat rides. They recently rethemed the antique cars to be a dinosaur safari. I don't see how this fits the Texas theme of the area, and I kind of miss the colorful cars, but I do like dinosaurs, so They also have a weird optical illusion walkthrough called Casa Magnetica that's open sometimes. I would recommend doing it at least once if it happens to be running while you're in the park. Outside of that, nothing too exciting when it comes to flat rides. A log flume, a scrambler, a rapids, with a very cool sign admittedly. Normal stuff. Though there is one other flat ride I want to point out before moving on. I've always said that you can't ask me if a ride is scary because my perspective is so skewed, but trust me when I say that the Texas Sky Screamer is the scariest ride in the entire park. This thing is a 400-foot tall star flyer and it is terrifying. I swear every time I ride this thing, we're making our way up and I think, surely we're almost at the top. We've been rising for ages. Only for me to look up and realize that, nope, we're about halfway there. The winds once you get to the top of this thing, horrifying. Plus, you can see the chains holding you up, and they do not look that sturdy when you are 400 feet up. This thing is so freaking scary. You have to ride it if you visit the park. 10 out of 10, great Starflyer. They should all be this tall. Alrighty then, let's move on to breaking the coasters into categories. Y'all know the drill by now. Why am I saying that? I've done this twice, and one of those times I didn't even break the coasters into categories. Well, you'll know the drill after this. Let's break down the coasters of Six Flags Over Texas. First up, we have the big three, the top dogs of Over Texas. In this category, we have New Texas Giant, Mr. Freeze, and Titan. After that, we have the support coasters. Wrapping this category from Over Texas, we have Runaway Mountain, Runaway Mine Train, Pandemonium, and Shockwave. Jumping down, we have the support coasters that I personally don't like as much, which means they are objectively worse. These coasters are Batman, Joker, Aquaman, and Judge Roy Scream. And finally, we have the kiddie coasters, Mini Mine Train and Wile E. Coyote's Grand Canyon Blaster. These guys aren't gonna get their own segments, but I will touch on them quickly. It's really fun that the Mini Mine Train is right next to the Runaway Mine Train, like they're a parent and kid. Plus, the Mini Mine Train goes right under Mr. Freeze, which is a funny contrast. As for Wile E. Coyote's Grand Canyon Blaster, ugh, what a name, rolls right off the tongue. It's just a normal kiddie coaster. It does have some cute theming with both the Coyote and the Roadrunner standing on rock work in the middle of the ride. But yeah, that's all I got for the kiddie coasters. So, there's the overall breakdown. Now that we've got our framework, let's get into the specifics. New Texas Giant, the original RMC. Can we all just take a moment to thank Six Flags for giving RMC a chance? And let's pay some respect to the New Texas Giant. If it weren't for this coaster, we wouldn't have all of these amazing RMC coasters all over the world. Thank you, New Texas Giant. My gratitude is immeasurable. Okay, but seriously, this is a great ride. I know that RMC would go on to bigger and better things, but for a first attempt, this thing is fantastic. That first drop is so good, and you fly out of your seat on so many of the airtime hills. Yeah, the last lap loses a bit of steam, but they make up for that with the tunnels, which add a bit of excitement. But speaking of those tunnels, I have to point out a moment in the final tunnel that I absolutely love. Every single hill on this ride gives at least some airtime, except one. In the final tunnel, there is a moment where you are rising. It feels like you're gonna get that airtime, and then nothing. It just abruptly flattens out. You get nothing. And it's hilarious. Once you notice it, you will never not notice it again. It should be disappointing, but it's such an abrupt lack of airtime that it circles back around into being a uniquely forceful moment. My dad says that it's his favorite part of the ride, and while I wouldn't go that far, I do love it. It's this odd little thing that adds so much character to Texas Giant. Man, I just love this ride. It's so fun from beginning to end. Mr. Freeze is one of my favorite coasters in Six Flags Over Texas. That backwards launch, shooting you through the inverted top hat? Oh, glorious. Genuinely one of my favorite moments on any coaster. That plus the spike where you drop face first towards the ground makes this a god tier coaster. And then they flipped the train so that you launched forward and ruined it. I was left destitute, knowing that one of my favorite coasters was ruined forever. But then they made it so that one train launched forward and one launched backwards, so I guess it's fine. Look, if you prefer the forwards launch, you're wrong, but fine. I'm glad you have the option. But the best part on this coaster is going through that top hat backwards. And yeah, you do it either way. But when you had the forward launch, by the time you go through the top hat backwards, you aren't going as fast, and you lose that feeling I love so much. Backwards is objectively better. Don't at me, I don't care. Oh, and cons. This coaster is really short and pretty unreliable. It shuts down a lot, so if there's a long line, mentally prepare yourself for a shutdown mid-wait, but it's totally worth the risk as long as you do the backwards launch. Okay, I know I ranked Goliath, this coaster's sister, down several categories in the Magic Mountain video, but Titan has that ascending helix before the brake run, so it's clearly much better? Look, Titan is my dad's favorite coaster in Over Texas, alright? I have to throw him a bone here. He filmed all this stuff for me. Plus, I like Titan. I love the first drop. I love the airtime hill after the turnaround. I love that the line is always short because no one knows where it is. If you've reached the entrance to New Texas Giant, you've gone too far. There's a path right before the snack stand. Follow that, you'll get there eventually. It's a good coaster, and it deserves to be in the top 3 in Over Texas. And yeah, maybe that means we need more elite coasters at Over Texas, but gosh dang it, Titan is a fun ride. Oh, and by the way, they're repainting it right now, so soon it will be blue? Not sure what the color change is about, but I'm glad they're taking care of it, and I think it'll look nice. Runaway Mountain would be a fairly typical family coaster if it weren't for one thing. It's an indoor coaster that takes place in total darkness. That single fact elevates this coaster greatly. Having no idea what is going to happen makes everything feel much faster and more forceful. Of course, the effect is lessened slightly if, like me, you've ridden the coaster so many times you have the entire layout completely memorized, but even then it's fun. And hey, it has probably the best theme queued of any ride in Over Texas, so it has that going for it. Make sure you don't miss this one. It's in its own little section in the middle of the park, not on the main pathway that circles the edge, so it can be easy to skip on accident. Runaway Mine Train at Six Flags Over Texas is the first ever Aero mine train, which is pretty cool. For the most part, this is a chill mine train, nothing too crazy. There's a couple of tunnels and a neat head chopper moment, but nothing too extreme. Until you get to the end. Look, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Ride this coaster in the back. Are you listening to me? Ride it in the last car. I mean, you should ride every mine train in the back, they're infinitely better that way, but it is a requirement for this one in particular. The ending of this coaster is S tier, and it is completely ruined if you sit anywhere but the back. I'm about to spoil the ending, so if you don't want to hear it, jump ahead. Okay? Okay. At the end of this coaster, you take one final lift hill into a show scene. It's a room themed to look like an old salon. The train goes through the scene slowly, tricking you into thinking the ride is over, when it abruptly picks up speed before yanking you into one final tunnel. The speed, airtime, and surprise of that final drop is so fun, and none of it happens if you are sitting in the front. Trust me. Even if you know it is coming, it is still so awesome. The ending of Runaway Mine Train is so great. Please do yourself a favor and experience it in the best way possible. Pandemonium is Over Texas's spinning coaster. It is a clone, but I honestly like the Pandemonium clones. They're lots of fun, even when you don't spin, but if you can get a good spin going, they're crazy. Plus, the drop off of the last brake run always comes a lot faster than you're expecting, and it gives a fun little pop of airtime. Overall, a really good family coaster. Of course, the problem with being a good family coaster is that the GP loves it. And when you combine a small capacity with being a GP magnet, you get long, slow lines. For real, if this thing has any kind of line, do not bother, it's not worth it. Of course, Pandemonium does have a single rider line that will always get you on really quickly. So if you're willing to break the party, or if you're alone, it's a good option. Shockwave, yeah! Finally, a Schwarzkopf with the double loops. Man, those loops are great. If you don't hurry out on those, you may not even be human. And then you get the turnaround where, if you're sitting on the right, it really dangles you over the ground. Very spooky. And finally, some of the most extreme airtime you will ever experience on a coaster. Seriously, if you are sitting in the back, this thing will launch you on that drop. Be prepared for bruised thighs. And the next hill gives so much floater. I've gotten upwards of 5 seconds on that thing when Shockwave is running well. This is the platonic ideal of a Schwarzkopf coaster, the one they should all be compared to. I love this thing so much. If you're someone who prefers Riddler's Mindbender at Over Georgia, don't even talk to me. Shockwave is 10 billion times better. Make sure you ride this one. It's behind the tower, go over the train tracks, then past the go-karts and you'll find it. This is the third coaster I've included directions for. I'd like to think they aren't necessary, but when I worked at Over Texas, I had to help a family who was hopelessly lost trying to find Shockwave, so, yeah, consult your maps, people. Look, I already expressed my opinion about the Batman clones in the Magic Mountain video. Go watch that if you're curious. They're good rides that I don't like. It's a me problem, nothing wrong with the coasters at all. Maybe someday I'll be able to enjoy them again, but Judge Troy Scream is Over Texas's only wooden coaster. Now, I tend to be pretty harsh towards old wooden coasters, but I like Judge Troy Scream. Yeah, it's mostly forceless, but you do get a little airtime on the first couple drops. Plus, it runs along the lake, which is really nice and pretty. Not a crazy coaster, but still fun. It's hardly ever open, which makes sense. No one ever rides this thing. It's almost always a walk-on. Part of the problem is that, once again, no one knows where it is. Over Texas has a serious problem with hiding its coasters. The entrance to Judge Troy Scream is in the corner of the park up by the Texas Skyscraper. It's honestly really hard to find if you don't already know it's there, which is extra funny in this case because Judge Troy Scream is the very first coaster most people will see when driving up to the park. It's right there at the entrance. So yeah, make sure you don't miss it on your visit if it happens to be open. Aquaman, our water coaster. Let me just walk you through the ride real quick. You start with a backwards launch over an airtime hill and up a spike, then a forwards launch over the same hill and up a different spike, then one final backwards launch which sends you further up the original spike before you come down for the splash. So looking at it objectively, not a super exciting coaster. I like the backwards launches and the fact that the launch goes over an airtime hill. I like that the spikes are bent. It gives a unique feeling that a straight spike wouldn't. But yeah, on a pure coaster level, not very exciting. But when looking at it as a water ride, this thing is rad. It is so cool that you only get the splash on the last drop. The pool actually rapidly fills when you're up on the spike, so when you drop down the last time, you get the big splash. This thing gets you soaked, especially if you sit in the front row, which may be a downside to some people, but in Texas, you gotta have a water ride. And I'm glad that our water ride is this cool. It's definitely better than the boring splashdown that was here before. Great addition for Over Texas. I'm glad we have it. And I'm glad they decided to add the turntable. I would not want to see this thing running on one-car operations. I have to talk about the free spins now, don't I? Ugh, I don't want to. Okay, fine. I don't like the 4D free spins. I just don't. They don't feel like coasters to me. They feel like flat rides. I'm not arguing that they aren't coasters. I'm not crazy. I'm just saying they don't give me any forces that I associate with coasters. They give me forces I associate with flat rides. Plus, they're slow loading, have small capacity, pulling the GPS, so long lines for an experience I don't even like that much? No thank you. But yeah, if these things scare you, just don't. You'll flip maybe twice, and the rest of the time you just rock gently. What a letdown. There you have it. All of the coasters that are currently operating at Six Flags Over Texas. But I don't think I can end this review without talking about one final coaster. I mentioned at the beginning of this video that Six Flags Over Texas was my home park growing up. I can split my memories from this park into two distinct categories. One is from when I was a little kid. All those memories are in the Looney Tunes little kid area of the park. And the other set of memories are from when I was a teenager and we started getting season passes to the park and I actually explored the rest of it. And in between those two sets of memories, bridging the gap, there is the party. My birthday party. I don't remember how old I was turning, maybe 9 or 10, but that party is my earliest memory of the rest of Over Texas outside of the kid area. It is my earliest memory of any park, really. And the very first coaster I rode at that party was La Vibora. Which means La Vibora was probably the very first real coaster I ever rode. The first I remember, at least. And that means something. To me, anyway. To be clear, this wasn't the beginning of my life as a coaster enthusiast. I was still a pathetic coward of a child back then, who refused to ride most coasters. It wouldn't be until I was in college that I really got into roller coasters. But La Vibora was the first step. And now it's gone. They've already torn it down. The last Intamin bobsled, not even given the dignity of an official final ride. Supposedly, they're gonna replace it with a 300-foot dive coaster, which I'll believe it when I see it. I guess if that actually happens, then it will be worth losing La Vibora, but I'm going to have to ride this new coaster myself before I make that call. I'll admit, I didn't care that much when I first heard they shut down La Vibora. I'd fallen in and out in love with it over the years, and there was a point in time when I would have been happy to see it go. But I'd come back around in recent years, and in a weird way, I'm glad I liked the ride when it was shut down. La Vibora, I know you were janky and could be painful. I know you had low capacity and long lines. I know you were sensitive to weather and were shut down a lot. But you were wild and fun and unique. And I'm glad that we were on good terms at the end. I'm glad that we were friends when they took you away. Know that I'll never forget you. And that I'll miss you. Rest in peace, old friend. Okay, that got weirdly emotional. Sorry about that, folks. I just had a lot of feelings about the whole situation. Let's move on to the pros and cons of the park and wrap things up. Cons. What are the cons of Six Flags Over Texas? Well, for one, our Fright Fest is so lame. I mean, seriously, compared to Fiesta, ours looks pathetic. But why? Why is Fiesta Texas so much better? The parks are so close and yet so far away. Why is my home park the lamer one? Why are you so perfect, Fiesta Texas? Why can't we have that? Why can't we be that cool? Sorry. Our Halloween event is fine. But yeah, I can't think of any major cons to Over Texas. The park's main weakness is that it doesn't really have an elite coaster. Mr. Freeze is too short, New Texas Giant is great, but not amazing, and Titan is... Titan. There isn't a standout coaster here. Now, if we do get that 300-foot dive coaster, maybe this problem will be addressed, and then Six Flags Over Texas will be perfect. As it is, this park is great. The themed areas are strong. The Central Plaza is really pretty, with the carousel and the fountain in the middle. There's a wide variety of rides, both coasters and flat rides. Heck, there's even a strong spread of dark rides. This park has no obvious weaknesses, but in the same breath, it has no obvious strengths. Just a very steady, reliable park through and through. So yeah, maybe I'm biased when I put this park in my top 3. I mean, I'm a coaster enthusiast, right? My ranking should be based on that. But hey, I'm not just a coaster enthusiast. I love amusement parks, every part of them. I love dark rides. I appreciate flat rides. I enjoy theming. I love just existing in theme parks. And maybe it's nostalgia, maybe it's the atmosphere, maybe it's the rides, maybe it's all three, but I love Six Flags Over Texas. It will always be my park, even if I never live in Texas again. I hope the park keeps growing and becoming better and better. Yeehaw, folks, it's done. I figured I'd use some Texas sayings considering the topic. Hope y'all liked the review and that I didn't seem too biased. I was planning to do Lagoon, like in Utah next, but then I got sad about La Vibora and decided to do Over Texas instead. So I guess Lagoon is next. I have plenty to say about that park, so be ready for more rambling. Catch you next time. Bye!